I made the exact same loaf of bread in 2 different machines, and one of them nearly baked itself into the lid. Not because it failed, because it rose too much. And that single difference ended up telling me almost everything about how these 2 machines actually perform. Today, I'm comparing the OSIPOTO 17-in-1 bread machine and the Neretva 20-program dual heater bread maker. And after baking multiple loaves side by side, they turned out to be surprisingly similar, but with a few differences that will absolutely matter depending on what kind of bread you want to make. Both machines are designed to be beginner-friendly. You add your ingredients, choose a program, and the machine handles the kneading, rising, and baking automatically. They both make up to 2-pound loaves, both offer multiple crust settings, and both have delay timers, meaning if you want to add ingredients before you go to bed and have the smell of hot bread wake you up in the morning, you can do that. But once I started actually baking with them, the differences started showing up. Before I get into that, if you want to check out current prices or specs for either of these machines, I'll put affiliate links in the description. And if you like seeing real side-by-side product tests like this, consider subscribing. I test a lot of home products so you can see how they actually perform before you buy. All right, first, let's talk about bread quality, because honestly, this surprised me. Using the same recipes, both machines produced bread that tasted almost identical. I made a loaf of basic white bread and a loaf of pumpkin bread, and the crust, texture, and crumb were extremely close. If someone handed me slices from both machines without telling me which was which, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. But the size and shape of the loaves did turn out different. The OSIPOTO uses a wider, more traditional bread-shaped pan, so the loaf comes out looking closer to something you'd buy at a bakery. The Neretva pan is taller and narrower, which means the loaf ends up more like a vertical block of bread. Functionally, that doesn't matter too much, but visually, it's definitely different. Where things got interesting was the rise time. The OSIPOTO Basic Bread program takes about 3 hours and 45 minutes for a 2-pound loaf. The Neretva finishes closer to 3 hours. And that longer rise on the OSIPOTO actually produced a bigger loaf, even though the crumb looked basically identical. Now, remember what I said earlier about the bread rising into the lid? That happened in the Neretva. Using a recipe I found online claiming to work in 2-pound bread machines, the dough rose high enough that it touched the viewing window and baked slightly onto it. It wasn't a disaster, it cleaned off pretty easily, but it did show that the OSIPOTO's larger pan gives you a little more room for bigger recipes. I haven't had an issue with the recipes in the Neretva cookbook rising too much, but it's something to be aware of if you're getting recipes online. Another big difference I noticed was ease of use. The Neretva instructions are much clearer. The manual breaks down every program with detailed information, mix times, rise stages, baking time, so it's easy to understand exactly what each setting does. With the OSIPOTO, some of the information wasn't as clear. For example, when I tried making pumpkin bread, the manual says quick bread and cake settings are for recipes using baking powder. But the recipes included for those settings used yeast. So it wasn't totally obvious which program was correct. For the Neretva, I could easily see that the cake setting didn't have any rise time, so I knew for sure that one would work for pumpkin bread. On the OSIPOTO, I ended up using the cake setting too, which worked fine, but it was more guesswork than I expected. The Neretva also has some extra programs that I actually found useful. Things like whole wheat bread, cornbread, sugarless bread, a ferment setting, and a fully customizable homemade program where you control the rise and bake stages. The OSIPOTO has different extras like rice bread, dough programs, mixing, and defrost. But personally, I found the Neretva's program list to be a little more practical for everyday bread baking. So overall, these machines bake very similar bread, but depending on what you care about, one might make more sense than the other. If you want traditional loaf-shaped bread and a little extra space for larger rises, the OSIPOTO is a really solid option. But if you want something that's easier to use with more flexible program settings, the Neretva is probably the better choice. Either way, you can look forward to a whole lot less work for homemade breads, jams, yogurts, and more. If you want to check out current pricing for either machine, the affiliate links are in the description. And if you enjoy honest side-by-side product tests like this, make sure to subscribe because I post new comparisons regularly.